Coming up in the National Report, rapid response. The Prime Minister addressing those tremors felt in New Providence yesterday. Budget preview. The Finance Minister unveiling the government's plan to further address revenue and expenditure. And female business power. A new program launched this week to empower women in business. The Bahamas Tonight, the National Report starts right now. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Altaviz Munnings. Welcome to the Bahamas Tonight, the National Report. Thanks so much for joining us on this busy news day. Adjusting national protocols to handle any real threat of an earthquake to the Bahamas is one proposal Prime Minister the Most Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis announced in the House of Assembly this morning. The Prime Minister delivered a communication in Parliament just one day after tremors from a 7.7 magnitude earthquake that struck Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Haiti, and Cuba were felt right here in New Providence yesterday afternoon. Officials of the United States Geological Survey noted that the epicenter was located in the Caribbean Sea. As a substantive minister of the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction, Prime Minister Minnis confirmed that he spoke with leaders of the impacted islands. Unfortunately, there was no loss of life. He also revealed that there were no reports of injuries of Bahamian students in Jamaica and students in Santiago and Manzanillo, Cuba, although government is still awaiting word from Bahamians in Guantanamo, also located in Cuba. As the lead agency on national disasters, Prime Minister Minnis indicated that officials of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, and the Bahamas Department of Meteorology are carefully monitoring any further earthquake advisories and tsunami threat messages from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center.
The Speaker advised the House that if there is an earthquake-generated tsunami and a threat to the region, including the Bahamas, the Pacific Tsunami Watch Center in Hawaii issues Tsunami Watch information statement bulletins to the Bahamas Department of Meteorology, which is the National Tsunami Warning Focal Point. The Met Department then notifies the Director of the National Emergency Management Center, NEMA, who will in turn activate the National Response Procedures from the Standard of Operating Procedures. The Director of NEMA, Mr. Speaker, is also responsible for notifying the Secretary to the Cabinet, the Prime Minister, the National Disaster Committee, local government, Family Island administrators, and the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA.
Prime Minister Minnis acknowledged that NEMA officials have recently participated in Caribbean tsunami exercises, which evaluated the national protocol, local tsunami response plans, increased tsunami preparedness, and improved coordination throughout the region.
Mr. Speaker, today, the Bahamas is not officially within the earthquake zone. However, it is essential for us to liaise with the relevant agencies, both regional and international research centers, so as to make determination whether amendments are required or amendments are necessary to include the Bahamas within earthquake zone. And Mr. Speaker, if such amendment is necessary, then it would be essential for the Bahamas to relook at its building codes and with international assistance make the necessary amendments to our building codes.
And still on news from Parliament, government's level of debt is expected to further increase from over $7 million to a projected $8.2 million, or some 64.4%, mainly as a result of Hurricane Dorian last year. Carla Palmer tells us more about government's supplementary budget statement delivered by the Minister of Finance this morning.
With damage and losses pegged at $3.4 billion as a result of Hurricane Dorian, Minister of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister the Honorable Peter Turnquest at the outset says the government will not impose additional taxes to offset expenses at this time, but instead has opted to increase borrowing from relevant entities in the near term.
Accordingly, and very conscientiously, the government has decided to fund the revenue loss and expenditure requirements through additional borrowings. Thus, I'm also tabling a new borrowing resolution for authorization to borrow beyond the $72.4 million, which excluded the $628 million for refinancing of maturing debt, approved at the time of the 2019-2020 budget communication in May of last year. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned during the tabling of the 2019 Fiscal Strategy Report in November, we anticipate that total revenue for fiscal year 2019-2020 will now be reduced by $232.6 million due to revenue losses and revenue foregone from VAT, business license fees, customs, and a number of other taxes in the hurricane-affected islands.
This means that total expenditure has increased as a result of incremental spending to initiate the rebuilding and restoration efforts. In fact, in today's proceedings, Minister Turnquest presented a draft resolution for a $50 million policy-based loan from the Caribbean Development Bank as part of the government's financing options.
It is important to remind this House that given the magnitude of the impact of Dorian on the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama, the government unveiled an unprecedented package of tax incentives and concessions as a key part of the establishment of the Special Economic Recovery Zone, or SEERS. I know that members opposite, like all Bahamians, that this was and is the right thing to do. However, the impact of those much-needed tax concessions for those islands means that over $200 million in tax revenue is being deliberately and conscientiously foregone. This is being done so that the government is doing as much as it reasonably can to aid the speedy recovery and restoration of those impacted communities.
The supplement also gives the breakdown of non-hurricane-related spending initiatives, inclusive of capital expenditure. The House has adjourned to February 5th at 10 a.m. Carla Palmer, ZNS Network News.
Well, House members only met for a brief session this morning as they attended the annual parliamentary service at St. Agnes Anglican Church on Blue Hill Road. Cleopatra Murphy reports that Archdeacon James Palacios challenged the parliamentarians to be more transparent and work in the interest of the population.
Vice President of the Bahamas Christian Council, Archdeacon James Palacios, had firm words for parliamentarians at the annual parliamentary church service, stressing the need for politicians to be accountable for their actions. While he congratulated government on projects like the Over the Hill Initiative and free education at the University of the Bahamas and Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute, he also called on parliamentarians to comply with legislation they themselves pass, adding that if the provision of the Westminster system is invoked in one instance, it should occur across the board. He also charged that people have a right to challenge politicians and policy.
You don't come out swinging as if I have no right to challenge you. I have 100,000 reasons, 28,000 for MP and 66,000 for minister. That's 94,000. I have 94,000 reasons to challenge you. All I'm saying is let's try to get it right. When we speak to people, let them know, yes, you said that, I will now look into it. I got it wrong, but for that, I apologize.
Palacios pointed out the country's record tourism numbers last year and says with less tourists decades ago, more people were employed. He says more intentional work must be done to translate 7.2 million visitors into jobs.
7.2 means nothing to me if I unemployed or my daughter who has 2 children can't find a job in the hotel or someplace else.
Palacios says, as leaders, politicians should not just surround themselves with people who think like them.
You don't need yes men and yes women around you looking for a taxi plate or a JP certification or whatever it is. You need people who would be honest with you, who would tell you that this is right, this is wrong, and this is the direction. We need true statespersons, not only in Parliament, and we need it primarily there, but we need it in our various communities as well.
Reverend Palacios also called on the political leaders to make the Bahamas better not just for a few people, but for all, because it is what the people of the Bahamas deserves. Cleopatra Murphy, ZNS Network News.
Also making national news this Wednesday, the Ministry of Health securing even more primary and mental health care for Hurricane Dorian survivors in Abaco and here in New Providence in the shelters. A memorandum of understanding was signed between the Ministry of Health and international non-government organization Americares to extend the health-focused relief organization's term of operations here in the Bahamas. The original agreement made back in September ensured the organization's service until March of this year. However, the new pact signed reconfirms the organization's commitment until June. Since Dorian, Americares has treated more than 4,000 individuals for medical purposes and rendered mental health services to more than 2,500 persons. Minister of Health, the Honorable Dr. Dwayne Sands.
This MOU will facilitate critical primary health, mental health, psychosocial support services with a social worker and clinical psychologist, as well as training to strengthen the capacity of the Bahamian healthcare system, specifically through the Ministry of Health, with first responders and other stakeholders to aid recovery from Hurricane Dorian. Americares has also agreed to provide medicine and to collect data to assist the Ministry of Health to track diseases, referrals, and health service utilizations during the recovery.
Americare's representative Corin Nally says it's all about ensuring the availability of critical health services throughout the island.
Americares is continuing to provide health services in Marsh Harbor, on Elbow Key, and Manowar Key. We're expanding our services now to include Foxtown, Cooperstown, Guana Key, and Green Turtle Key. Americares has also delivered medicine, medical supplies, and relief items valued at more than $2.6 million to support the health needs of survivors. Americares is proud to continue working alongside the Ministry of Health as we begin the recovery.